A wonderful Tuesday to you. It's IB Nation Sports Talk. It is Steyer's, I don't know how to make a squared with my hand, like a hand signal. Steyer Squared Day. He's Jesse Steyers. I'm Sean Steyers. Sounds like Cleveland got at least some weather today. We started off the day with a few inches of snow here in South Bend, and then as the day went on, it warmed up a couple degrees, and it was cold rain the rest of the day. What did Cleveland get?
Cleveland it started off actually colder in the morning, and I think it got warmer as the day went on, but it's just been darkness, coldness, and windiness all day. And so as soon as you step outside, the hair's going everywhere. There's rain smacking you in the face. And I decided to go into work today, so I got a good dose of getting smacked in the face with some wind and rain.
Tommy Guns says he's getting dumped on in Chicago. So,
and that doesn't sound good because that's just going to keep working its way east to Cleveland. So it's like it sounds like it's just going to rain all night.
Yeah, sounds.
Are we surprised though? Because I think the nation is mourning after last night's game.
Is the nation mourning? Salty likes the hoodie. Thank you. Got this.
Hey, I even told you that when I saw you last time.
Yeah. Christmas gift, actually. So, yeah, we will get to the national championship game. Folks are very happy about the photo that I've used, the cover photo for the show today. DK, not happy about it. Blasphemous, he says. He'd rather look at Dak Prescott.
Both are winners.
That's true. True story. It's a photo of from the game last night. A Michigan player, I think it was Sindel, whatever his name is, the defensive back making a tackle against Washington is the cover photo we used. I mean, got to do what we can. Anthony, appreciate the super chat, says he hasn't been able to watch much live lately. Looking forward to a great season at IB. So are we, Anthony. So are we. Well, we'll get to the national championship game here in a minute, but we had some breaking news early this evening, late this afternoon. That's right. Jayden Harrison from Marshall, and he started his career at Vanderbilt, wide receiver / kickoff returner. Not a big guy, 5'11", 195 pounds, but you don't have to be big to return kickoffs for big yards. Second in the nation, averaged 30.7 yards on 23 kickoff returns this past season for Marshall. He's originally from Tennessee. And was his he actually returned 2 for touchdowns as well, and he earned All-American honors from multiple organizations: Football Writers Association of America, Walter Camp Football Foundation, Athlon, CBS, Fox Sports, and Phil Steele as well. 28 receptions for 410 yards, 14.6 per reception this year, 71 for 779 over the course of his career as a wide receiver. Can play Z or slot. The other Z receivers are Jaden Greathouse. This is potentially, of course, Greathouse, Mitchell, and Cam Williams. The X guys, the bigger bodied guys, Jaden Thomas, Deion Colsey, Bo Collins, Micah Gilbert as well. But the primary reason they went out and got him is kickoff return. So this is the 7th transfer portal guy with the addition of Jayden Harrison. What do you think about this move by the Irish, Jess?
Yeah, so I was at work today, got a little bit bored, and once I saw the news, I kind of popped up some YouTube highlights, and I think the first thing that came to mind is obviously the speed. You're always going to find a way to put speed on the field, or anytime you can get a boost in the speed department, that's never a bad thing. And so, yeah, it makes the return game more dynamic. Good hands. And I think the thing that surprised me the most is he has a really big frame for someone that's, kind of small. And I say small.
Well, he's a little for a 5'11" guy.
Yeah. And I'm like 5'10", 5'11". So like small is relative here. But to me, you're
gonna give him the quickness advantage over you.
It's definitely going to give him the quickness advantage over me. So, but like and I hate that it comes back to this, but to me, the best comparison that I can think of is Kevontae Turpin for the Cowboys. The USFL MVP, got brought into the Cowboys to mainly be a return guy, play a little bit in the slot here and there. And now the Cowboys in Turpin's year 2 have actually developed some more kind of run plays for him or plays center around him. So that's kind of what I'm guessing you'll see out of Notre Dame is a few design gadget plays with him in there.
This guy can do that as well. And, obviously the danger with that, because the receiver room is becoming deeper with the other additions that they already have with guys like Chris Mitchell and Bo Collins. And now you add this guy, plus the guy that they had and the freshman coming in. How much is he actually on the field? Because, we've seen plenty of times before where personnel wise, you tip, this could be coming if this guy's on the field, that kind of stuff. It's something to watch out for down the line. But you do, again, and like in those highlights that you talked about, you see him with some reverses or end arounds, some jet sweeps and that kind of stuff. So it's, it's something that everyone obviously wanted to see Chris Tyree do a little bit more of, that we didn't see that much of, but he's got that skill set. So I like the depth piece just in terms of the receiver room. But again, it's the kickoff returns. A guy taking 2 back for touchdowns in the same season. He had a 98-yarder this year, had a 99-yarder a couple of years ago. So a guy, you talked about that speed, and speed does kill, and he's got a lot of it. And that'll be big, and like you look at Jadarian Price, he actually averaged a little bit better on his kickoff returns this year. The thing is, he didn't have that many. He had just 10 returns, and he averaged 34.4 on those 10 returns, but he didn't have enough returns to qualify for the top spot. The Irish as a team had just 21 returns, but that is a product of what, Jesse?
Speed.
Good defense. Good defense. The fact that Notre Dame didn't have a lot of kickoff returns means that there was not a lot of scoring against them, right? So that, you can't knock Jadarian Price, but
can't get the ball if you're not letting the other team score.
That's my point. Thank you. And now Price, whether or not he continues to be the kickoff return man, or maybe that goes someplace else, that'll be sort of TBD, I think, because with Audric Estime leaving, he becomes a bigger part of the running back rotation, and potentially
it's kind of the formula that we've seen is younger guys start off their career. A backup running back usually gets their shot as a returner until they become kind of mixed into that rotation. The exception would be Devin Ford, but they got him specifically, I think, kind of for that reason and to provide more depth in the running back room. I guess if he's going to return kicks, you would have to assume that he's likely going to be in the mix to return punts as well, right?
Potentially. Yeah.
So, yeah, I would say that that's something else to look forward to is, if he's a dynamic kick returner, then I don't have any question that he would be a dynamic punt returner as well, like a Devin Hester type of guy. So,
yeah. Salty is critiquing the definition on the camera lenses.
You can't win them all. This is a camera built into the laptop.
Jesse's got a little soft focus going on there. I mean, I've got the sharp focus because my Mac, I only bought it in August, so that's what, 5 months ago or something like that. So
you also have better lighting. I'm still trying to figure out my lighting, and my ring light actually broke on our last podcast.
And that ring light, like you've gone many rounds with the ring light. I don't have a ring light, and somehow my lighting has been a little bit more. I see you took down the Christmas tree. Did you guys do that over the weekend?
Yeah, we did we did a lot over the weekend. Step 1 was taking down and putting away Christmas stuff. Step 2 was going through all of the clutter and decluttering. And then step 3 was introducing the new stuff we got from Christmas. And step 4 was doing a clean. It was a 2-day affair. It took a Saturday and Sunday. So my whole weekend was cleaning and, putting together the house. But it looks a lot better now. So happy about it.
All right. Anthony wants to know your 40 time. Did you ever have an official 40 time that you want to talk
about? I got under 5 a couple times.
Okay.
4.8 was probably, I think, the best I ever did when training.
Okay. That's middle linebacker. Don't forget. So,
And
I
that
mean,
was in an era where middle linebackers
Even
didn't need to
Manti
be
had troubles, keeping it under 5 sometimes. So,
well, and I was kind of in that right before that era, before middle linebackers were run stoppers first. Now they are kind of the hybrid position, especially in the NFL. So when I was playing, was a little bit not speed wasn't as relevant as long as you could fill some downhill holes. But I think in today's game, I probably would have been more equipped at like the defensive end position.
a lot of we've talked before. Our guy Dan Quinn loves those safety bodies playing linebacker, but there's a lot more of that just across the game now with guys who are safeties. Look at Drew Tranquil and where he started out and where he ended up playing linebacker. So
yeah, it's just kind of crazy that that's like the kind that the progression is guys will start out in college as safety, and then they'll move to be kind of an undersized linebacker, and then they'll bulk up, and now they have safety speed, but they're playing linebacker. So I don't think I was ever like slow, but I definitely wasn't what you would call fast. But I think I had some deceptive speed here and there.
Yes, your acumen, your film study, your knowing where you were supposed to be helped you be like a step faster, right?
Yeah, I mean
On the
that's what I've
reaction
talked
time.
about a lot before.
Yeah,
I really studied the game in order to kind of make up for maybe the lack of speed or
right.
anything. But my claim to fame was legging out a triple inside a minor league baseball stadium. So
That's right.
while being told to stop at second, but I knew
Yes,
my speed.
that head
I
coach of
knew my
yours.
speed.
That head coach of yours, always with the stop sign. What was his deal, man? What was he thinking?
The
I don't
doubles
even
were
know.
too easy. It was time to start squeezing in some triples.
That's right. Should have gone for inside the park home runs more often, I guess. Andre also wants more whiteboard over the next 3 to 4 months.
We're gonna have downtime.
Do you have any whiteboard? Maybe you should start thinking about some whiteboard ideas and put together, kind of where some whiteboard might be dropped in at some points.
I'm thinking about maybe a film review of some Denbrock and Jayden Daniels and how that could be incorporated into Riley Leonard.
Okay, like it.
We'll see here and there. Well, yeah, I think that's I need to sit down one of these days and find some, now that the season is over and we've got some good time, find some things and also too, if there's anything that people would like me to look at, that's also an option too. So if you have suggestions,
it's a good one. Throw your ideas. What do you want
happy to
whiteboarding?
entertain them.
Yeah, I'm sure Salty's got to have some ideas, but Andre throwing his own heat.
DK brings up a good point here. The bar route on the whiteboard. I no longer guard running backs running wheel routes out of the backfield. I just run my bar routes. That's all I do.
All right, national championship game last night. Michigan beat Washington 34-13. They capped their 15-0 season. They give Michigan their first national championship since they shared it in 1997 with Nebraska. Who's got it better than them, Jess? Who's got it better than them?
I don't think and I say this in all seriousness.
You're supposed to say nobody.
Nobody. No, but honestly, this week is the pinnacle of football in the state of Michigan. You have Michigan winning the national championship, and you have the Lions, who just won the division for the first time ever and hosting a playoff game for, I don't know, like 30 years or something like that, or that might be the first time ever. So if you're a Michigan football fan, this is your week. I don't think that anything can top this week except maybe a Lions loss on Sunday. But hey, who would want that to happen besides me?
Yep. 1997. C.J. Carr, not born yet. His grandfather, of course, Lloyd Carr, led the Wolverines to that championship with Brian Griese in 1997 as the quarterback. Tom Brady was the backup, and Charles Woodson beats Peyton Manning for the Heisman Trophy. And, of course, later on, Peyton and Ryan Leaf would be the 1-2 picks in the NFL draft, 1997. That takes me back and makes me feel old when I was Still bouncing somebody on my knee. But most Notre Dame fans were either rooting for Washington or against Michigan last night, depending on your perspective, I guess. Do you think that especially as Notre Dame fans, can you at least take solace in the fact that Ohio State fans have to live with Michigan winning a title for at least another year? I mean, you're out there in Bucknuts land. Were they sad today?
Honestly, no one came into the office today, so I don't know if that was
Maybe
directly
that's why.
related to each other. But after the game last night, I think like an hour or so had passed, and Naomi asked me, she looked over at me and she's like, "Why are you so mad?" And I was like, "Well, Michigan just won the national championship, right?" Like, I don't know. I didn't want it to happen. I know that it was probably going to happen at some point or whatever.
I would have paid to see you and Vince watch the game together last night. Actually, that would have been worth the price of admission for me.
Yeah, there were a couple. We'll get into my thoughts about the game itself, but
Yes.
yeah, I mean, I don't enjoy them winning, and I really wanted them to lose. So I was a little bit defeated last night, and
I stayed a little ambivalent. I was just mostly ticked off that my parlay didn't come through because
also same. I had a lot of stuff going on in that.
I didn't. Did you win anything at all?
No, and that was the other frustrating part.
I had a 3-leg parlay that I thought was pretty solid. People were telling me that I took the under on 55.5, and that ended up producing. And I'm sitting there doing the math at the end because I had the under on the game. I had Corum to score a touchdown. That finally happened. He ended up with 2 of them, obviously. But then I also had Penix to throw for at least 300.
Yeah, that's the one that screwed me.
And I'm sitting there doing the math though, and I'm like, well, they score, they've got a chance if he can just hit a couple of passes, and he ended up with, I think, 255 is what he ended up with. I mean, if he hits that pass that got called back on the holding call, I'm right there in the ballpark.
Yeah, so. And the Dunze drop touchdown as well. You would probably be right there. And I had him for 302 passing touchdowns. So I, came up short on both of those. And it was just every time they ran the ball in goal line, I about lost my mind.
I couldn't figure out the game plans of either team really. Michigan, they get up to the 14-3 lead and they decide, we're going to start throwing the ball around now. And then Washington, with a running back with a bum ankle and a bum knee.
That's what, they were giving the ball to the guy who had one healthy body part.
Yeah. I don't get it. I didn't really understand what exactly they were doing, but I think the bottom line to me is 2 things for Washington, because I think this could have been a much more competitive game. Penix, one, he was facing some pressure, probably the most pressure that he's faced all year. That didn't look like the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line to me out there for Washington, especially with those holding calls, fair or not later on. But didn't look like the Joe Moore award-winning line. Penix looked, I'll give him the fact that maybe he was a little bit I give him full credit for gutting it out there in the fourth quarter and trying. It looked like, and I haven't seen any official reports today, but it looked like he probably broke some ribs or something, the way he was hurting out there. So give him credit later on. But so my comment is more about early in the game. He was off. Obviously he was off all night. I don't know if he just wasn't ready for the moment or what, but he was off, and then his receivers had so many drops as well, and that did Washington 0 favors.
Yeah, I guess my general kind of observations would be Michigan's defense, really, really, really good defense, and so I think that played into some of the miscues with Penix. I thought, the offensive line, for being the Joe Moore winner, not great, especially 73, the right tackle. And I thought, I get you can't pass the ball every play, but I thought Washington really forced some runs when things weren't going well, right? Like Penix is your guy. And I mean, outside of a couple explosive, broken run plays for Michigan, I didn't think their offense was great either. And I just think overall, outside of Michigan's defense, it was a sloppy national championship. I don't think either offense played well. And I thought Michigan's defense played really solid. But to me, the biggest thing offensively for Washington was if we're thinking of Penix like a rifle, he just felt a little off calibrated all night, and he couldn't get calibrated. And then it didn't help that even on some of those throws, his wide receivers were dropping it, or they weren't on the same page, or it gets called back on a phantom holding, that sort of stuff. They just never could get in momentum. And then they'd get a couple first downs, and then 73 would hit a false start. And now you're looking at 1st and 15 again.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I think the momentum, I think you hit it on the head. They just couldn't string a few plays together. It was just like, here, there. Penalty, calls back a big play. Overthrow. I mean, to me, that 4th down when he overthrows Odunze, it felt like it was probably over at that point. Yet somehow, because like you said, it's not like Michigan just took over the game after that. That's kind of what Michigan is. Washington was still in it. They still had a chance in the 4th quarter. But again, and that's where, like, you think with a quarterback like Penix and the kind of weapons that he has around him and supposedly the offensive line that he has. But, I just came away completely unimpressed by Washington's offensive line. But you thought that if you're going to leave them in the game in the 4th quarter, if you're going to let them hang around that long, like it felt like someone like Penix had a chance, to rally him, but it just never came together. They just, like you said, they couldn't get any momentum and just string a few plays together and hit something.
Yeah, and I think the thing that really surprised me is Michigan was tempting Washington by putting a Odunze one-on-one out there, Romeo Odunze, and they just didn't go after it. And they had a lot of success. And, I should have actually maybe had a whiteboard for this one, but anytime Washington, they were in like 2x2 sets, anytime they would motion a guy and get a stack, and so the wide receivers were stacked on each other and then they would release, Michigan couldn't do it. They had a lot of open opportunities when they would stack like that. And
like that overthrow to Odunze. Yeah,
exactly. And so I don't understand when Michigan's tempting you and allowing you to play one-on-one with the top wide receiver in the country and you're creating motion stack, why are you not taking advantage of that consistently? And the other blaring thing to me, Michigan offensively, Jim Harbaugh came out and said that J.J. McCarthy is the best quarterback in Michigan history. Yet when the game was on the line in the second half, 1, McCarthy didn't look good, and 2, they had no faith in him. They were just handing the ball off consistently. And it just felt like, again, the game plan was, okay, let's just not let JJ turn the ball over. Let's not let him make a critical mistake. And if that's the game plan, that's fine. But you can't say that this is the best quarterback Michigan has ever seen and him go out and perform like that. They had zero faith in him. They did not want him to lose that game. They were doing everything they could, in my opinion, to take the ball out of JJ McCarthy's hands.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like he had a huge night. I mean, really, like when you look at the way Michigan was built and just what they've done all season, but especially last night, the way they go about things, it's like you're going back 15 or so years to the Greg McElroy, A.J. McCarron, Alabama teams. He was 10 of 18 for 140 yards, didn't turn the ball over, and that's basically all they asked of him. He hit that big run, I think it was on 3rd down to convert. That was a big one. But other than that, Blake Corum goes for 134 yards, Donovan Edwards 104 yards, touchdown runs of 41 and 46. They ended up with over 300 yards, but they had over 200 of it by halftime. And it was just keep the ball away from Washington. And like you said, don't let JJ McCarthy make any mistakes. That's what it seemed like.
And so you hit it like over 200 at half and finished just above 300. And then 100 of that came off those 2, Edwards runs. So it's like to me, and I get it that those plays happen. You can't take those plays away. They are what they are. But you take away those 2 big run plays, like what did Michigan's offense really accomplish all evening? Like they really didn't do a whole lot, in my opinion. But that was the formula for them.
Those were relatively easy plays to make as well, because in both cases there were gaping holes, and Washington overcommitted. There was no help back there at all. It's like once Edwards hit those holes, there wasn't much work to do afterwards. It was just run to daylight.
Yeah, it was jump cut, find the hole, and then just take off.
Yeah. When you look at what Michigan did though offensively, and like you listen to Marcus Freeman talk about wanting to be an offensive line, defensive line driven team. I mean, they ended up averaging 8 yards per carry last night. Does this feel like sort of the blueprint that Freeman wants to emulate?
I think it is because Notre Dame's defense is closer to Michigan's defense than I think what many people would expect. But I don't think that Marcus Freeman would be as one-dimensional as they were on offense. I think he definitely wants to lean on the offensive line in the run game, but I think he
I don't
wants
know,
more
man.
passing production than what they showed last
Did you
night.
watch that Ohio State game this year? Like, I don't know. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think he wants to completely take the air out of the ball, but having like this year specifically, having a mobile quarterback like Riley Leonard definitely helps as well, just in terms of another dimension that even Michigan doesn't have with that offense. So yeah, it definitely seems that way, but like when you look at the body types that Michigan has on the defensive side of the ball specifically, like that's where Notre Dame still has to go if they want to get there. And by the way, coming out of that 2012 BCS championship game, again, like when you look at where the game has gone offensively over the last few years, Michigan is still the outlier. Like this really is the old Nick Saban blueprint before he finally realized,
really strong
there's more to
defense.
offense than just, beating people to death up front,
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is Michigan's formula for success is built around controlling the ball in terms of clock management, not turning the ball over, and getting an early lead because you can't play that style of offense if Penix jumps out to a 14-0 lead.
That's right.
And so it's a very step-by-step formula. And as long as it's, they're hitting their steps or they're making those, benchmarks, then everything goes to plan. I wanted Washington to jump out to the lead so we could kind of see Michigan get out of that formula that they used the last 4 or 5 games of the
Penix
season.
could never make the plays. Penix and his guys couldn't make the plays. Didn't have a chance. Yep, that's right.
But I think if you're a Notre Dame fan, you should feel rejoice or hope because they are very close to kind of what that Michigan blueprint was last night. Really good defense, strong offensive line and run game, not as strong as Michigan's, but I think that they're more dynamic in the passing game. So how can you find a way to use your passing game to maybe, make up for the fact that you don't have as strong as a run game or offensive line? I think the answer is Riley Leonard because he also adds another dimension in the run game, right? Like I think he's a better runner than JJ McCarthy. And I think he's a better JJ McCarthy makes good throws here and there. He's just not consistent. And so I think the consistency in Leonard's pass game will prove to be pretty detrimental.
I think that's detrimental or an asset. Like
sorry.
Yeah, I mean but that's still to me going to be the question, especially if you're forced into comeback mode, because we saw some of it in that Duke game, for example. Like when you're built like that, just what you said, it's easy to play with the lead, but it's much harder to play from behind. And I think that will be the question for a guy, like look at all those 2-minute drills, just as an example. Remember to start off the season for Sam Hartman last year with, like pass, but like, can Riley Leonard be that kind of guy? I really don't know about that. Like, can he be the guy, if you're down by a touchdown at the end of the game, can he be that guy to use his arm to do it?
Yeah, like if Notre Dame is down by 10 with 10 minutes left, can he go down the field efficiently, passing the ball, get a touchdown, make it a 1-score game, hope your defense can get a stop, and then go down the field and ultimately win the game again?
Right. DK, by the way, I think it was DK said he fell asleep at halftime. I actually felt like, they kicked it off a little after 7:45. To me, it felt like 7:45. That's like, I think that is maybe the perfect time like perfect kickoff time in terms of not too early, not too late. For any major sporting event. I think that is a really good
if we
time,
could stick to
actually.
this like 7:30 thing, it would be fantastic because
Yeah.
I got that game was over before 11 o'clock, and I swear every other national championship bleeds until after midnight, almost 1 o'clock in the
Ugh,
morning. And it was really
yeah.
funny because the night before, so Sunday night, Naomi asked me, she's like, "What time's the national championship on?" And I was like, "Oh, I think it's like 8:30, maybe even 9 o'clock." And I was like, "Let me check my phone." And I was like, 7:30. What is this business? And that proved to be very helpful, right? At the end of the day, like, again, we weren't going to bed, at midnight, 12:30, 1 o'clock. It was, all right, this game is over. And, I get it. It's still late, but it's not like deadly late. You're like, not to the point where like you're gonna be feeling it at work the next day.
DK knocking a couple cold ones back last night. Okay. Cure for what ails you, I guess. So Notre Dame ends up number 14 in the final AP poll with a 10-3 record. They moved up 2 spots from the poll before the bowl games. Michigan, of course, is number 1. Washington, Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Florida State in that order. 7th straight top 20 finish for Notre Dame. 7 years in a row. Basically, since the train wreck season of 2016, they have finished in the top 20 every time. And there are only 4 other teams that have done that. Can you name any of those 4 other teams that have finished in the top 20 for the last 7 years?
Obvious answer.
I bet you get them. Think about
Alabama,
it.
Georgia, Ohio State.
Yep.
I would say Clemson, but not Clemson.
It's easier than you think.
Penn State.
Nope. You just said it.
Clemson.
Yeah.
So I got them all right.
Yeah.
Not a hard task.
Yep. And Clemson just snuck in there this year by their finish starting with Notre Dame, unfortunately.
That's the one I was hung up on this year. I was like, I don't know if they made it, technically in that final rankings.
Mm-hmm. Decaf said, perfect time for a Saturday night. Some people have to get up at 4:15 in the morning. I don't blame you. I used to have that schedule myself, and get it, like trying to stay up late. There were times, like watching Sunday night or Monday night football, I would try to take a little bit of a nap, for a couple hours before the game sometimes, because that wake up call, I mean, it hits you. I'll be curious how long this Monday national championship game format stays in place, because the NFL, these last couple of weekends to close out their regular season, they start moving some of their games to Saturday because there are no college football games. But with the playoff format, you're going to have more Saturday. You're going to have college football games played on Saturday, and it's going to, bleed into you're going to have both NFL and college playing playoff games at the same time. We'll save that because that's kind of ties into something we're going to talk about in rapid fire. So we'll talk about that in a minute. I wanted to see, though, while we have our live viewers right now, have a little technical thing going on that I wanted to see if we could get some input on. So my dad, he's losing his vision. He's a Vietnam vet. He was over there, had Agent Orange exposure, and he's gradually losing his vision. So it's gotten a lot worse in the last couple of years. And Jesse can attest to this because he's helped him out with a lot of technology type stuff. My sister is a college basketball coach. So my dad, she's out in California. So my dad used to watch her games on the ESPN app on the iPad, but that became too much, like seeing, like the small icons and all that stuff. So Jesse, over Christmas, being the great grandson that he is, he set the ESPN app up on the TV,
Bigger screen.
and all that kind of stuff, but there's still major issues with the small buttons on the remote that he can't see and, reading what's on the screen. With the voice activated, like if you got a new TV, have you ever, used one of those voice activated remotes, Jesse, or anyone out there who might be, watching and can comment in the chat? Like, could that be the solution? Like you get the voice activated remote. Can you go like, go to the ESPN app and then say, go to the Cal Poly women's basketball game? Like, do you think that would work? Like, have people used those enough that like, because we're trying to figure out, because he lives by himself and he's had to go get help, to open up the app because the remote thing is just, it's not working right now. You can attest to this more than me, Jess, because you've been the technical support for your grandpa.
Yeah, I was, it used to be we could be on the phone for an hour trying to get him navigated to where he needs to be. And by that time, the game is almost at halftime or, maybe even into the third quarter. But we've gotten a new, and I don't know if I told you this part, but I taped stuff onto his remote. So he had like pointers to where he needs to get to.
But the problem is he still has to read that, and he has to, like, literally. So you were out to dinner with some friends Saturday night, and I got the call, and so we do like, okay, FaceTime me and then hold the camera up. So he's trying to hold the camera up to the TV so I can see what's on the screen, but he kept turning away so I could only see half the screen. But then he also had to get out his flashlight so he could like read the buttons on the remote, and it was just, he finally had to go get a neighbor. Unfortunately, the neighbor was able to help him. But it seems like the voice, you obviously going to have to invest in the new TV, but it seems like the voice remote might be our best shot. What do you think?
Yeah, and it sounds like based on some of the feedback, there's multiple options. The Apple TV has a voice remote. Roku has one. It sounds like Xfinity has one. Comcast has one. And so it sounds like the voice remote is going to have to be the option. Like you hit the button and say, open the ESPN app, and it takes them to the ESPN app.
And I tried it just experimenting today because I just got a new TV right before Christmas, and it does. And I just found out today it's got one of the voice remote, so I pushed the little microphone and I said, like, open up Netflix. And I don't have Netflix all installed yet, but it opened up Netflix. So like it at least got me halfway there. So that might have to be.
That cuts out about half of the process.
Right. You just have to know where one button is.
Yeah.
Push that button, hold it down, and talk to the TV. So maybe that's it. I see a lot of people chiming in saying the voice remote is pretty good. So
I wish that I could just VPN into his TV and just control it for him.
See, Salty says the other option is for Jesse to go there for the games and do whatever he wants. The problem is my dad lives in Kansas. So we were doing all this back in Kansas over Christmas. So, I live in Indiana. Jesse lives in Ohio. Dad lives in Kansas. Daughter, my sister lives in California where she coaches. So,
read that last comment.
David. So David says he linked up his dad's computer for his TV. That way I can zoom in and control his TV. Ooh, interesting. Now, my dad doesn't have a computer, but he does have the iPad. So I don't know. This might be something you need to.
Yeah, David and I might need to have a discussion later.
Yeah.
I'm glad to know there's options out there for what we're talking about, because we definitely need a better solution than what's going on, because it's like you said, it's FaceTiming, it's pointing to the screen, and then he's got to put the phone down, turn the flashlight on, look at David, the remote.
I don't want this to sound, my dad's in the, he's a boomer.
He's almost 80.
Like I said, he's a Vietnam vet. He's almost 80 and he's losing his eyesight. So the problem is the more technology you involve, the more difficult it's going to get, basically, so that's why I thought when I saw this voice remote, I thought that they'd been like doing it like that, like linking in with the computer. That's not a bad option. But David says his dad is a vet as well, and he is 83. All right, so they're probably about
similarities.
4.5, 5 years apart. Yeah. So, but again, the problem is his eyesight is going. So the more technology you involve and the more buttons he has to find and stuff like that, that's where it becomes an issue.
It really sounds like this great grandson of his needs to do some more research and come up with the best solution.
Yes, that's right. I think that's what it comes down to, basically. All right. Well, I do appreciate the input. Jesse, do you mind if I put your email, or do you want to? Can you type your email in there? Like,
yeah, I'll type
somebody
my
can
email.
email you information.
It's just my email. None of you better spam me with some crazy stuff. This is the last time I trust any of you. And that's specifically to DK. I feel like, and Tommy Guns. I feel like those are the guys that might send me some unsolicited emails.
I think you're right. Yeah, T Guns is right. Come on, Mr. Engineer.
Well, I wanted to listen and find out and then figure out what might be best.
Right.
Hang on. I don't know. It wouldn't let me post that. Maybe it's
Salty says his progressive vision loss may be genetic. I think the VA has determined it is 60% due to Agent Orange. So I think that there is at least some, genetic in there, but they've determined that because of the Agent Orange exposure, it's 60%. So, there's veterans disability and all that kind of good stuff. Keith, I mean, this is my dad as a vet and is 94, and I got to keep him away from all electronics. And that's, I'm just being pragmatic about this whole thing. And that's what I generally try to do. And, like when he called me the other day and he asked me to help, I was like, oh boy, this is going to be because I didn't set any of it up. I had no idea. And then it got logged out, of course, and all that good stuff. But I appreciate the input from everybody. We'll have to give some of that a roll. In the meantime, Jess, are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's do it. It's chunky today.
All right. So this one is courtesy of Father David on the Champions Lounge boards today. Fill in the blank. The thing that you are most excited about with Notre Dame football in 2024 is blank.
The thing I am most excited about Notre Dame football in 2024 is the defense combined with Mike Denbrock and Riley Leonard, because I think the defense is going to be better, and it was already a championship level defense. It ranked in top 5 in most categories. They were in really top 10 in the kind of last few, and they were number 1 in some of those categories as well. And so I think if and I assume it's going to elevate again next season, and then you combine that with a proven offensive coordinator and a guy that pairs well with the type of style that Riley Leonard plays with. I think that is what I'm most excited about, is the offense taking the next step with the defense getting even better.
Yeah, see, DK says OC. Anthony says offense under Denbrock. And that's where I'm going. I'm most excited to see what was already statistically a pretty good offense. Now, granted, there's going to be a lot of new faces out there, but, the general philosophy worked for the majority of games. But I want to see, can Mike Denbrock bring this offense up to a level where it is more consistent over the entire course of a 12-game season and into the playoffs, and just what he is able to do with a quarterback like Riley Leonard after what he was able to do in a very short amount of time with Jalen Daniels down there at LSU. I'm not saying that he's going to turn Riley Leonard into Daniels, but at the same time, I think that the experience that he had with him is going to help him quite a bit. And I'm excited to see what this offense can be against what, at least going into the season, is not going to be the same kind of schedule, that Notre Dame had to face this year with some of the top-notch opponents that they had to face this year. So I'm just most excited about that Denbrock addition and what he can bring to this offense.
Yeah, and it's to get more specific about it, it's in the games that matter the most, right? Like Notre Dame hasn't had issues of recent with, pounding Navy or, Stanford this past season. Teams like that. I just want to. The offense needs to be better and more dynamic in the Florida State, Texas A&M, etc. games.
Yeah. This is a good one, though, as well. DK says no, but can he turn Riley Leonard into Riley Leonard? Because
Yeah.
even before the injury this year, Riley Leonard, this year wasn't what he was the year before. So I think that's a good one. I think that's probably the most important thing, what exactly he can do with that. Where would you put Notre Dame on your way too early 2024 preseason rankings? We've seen some of these way too early rankings start to pop up.
Vince and I kind of discussed this last week in Rapid Fire, and it popped up, and at the top of everyone's list is going to be Georgia, Alabama. I think Ohio State belongs up there. Obviously, Michigan, kind of Old Miss. I'm not sold on Mizzou being good again. I'm not sold on Arizona as well.
Like, apparently Missouri's mad that Stuart Mandel doesn't have him. He's got him down there around 20 or something like that. I can't see a team like that in the SEC that's had one good year, being that good again next year. I find it hard to imagine.
No, you're okay. I think that the best fit right now for Notre Dame, or anything I'd feel comfortable with, probably like a 7 to 12 range. I think that's an honest kind of spot for where they're at. And again, we're talking about a defense that was already a national championship level defense in my eyes. Getting some key players back, also adding some players, and then the development of some of these younger guys that showed a little bit over the season. And then again, combining that with, Denbrock and Riley Leonard, you would assume the offense is going to be better. And so I think that is what propels them at least into the top 10.
Yeah, I think one of the things that makes this tough is the transfer portal and what exactly everyone's going to get out of the transfer portal. Everyone's going to have some losses because it's college football. What exactly is Michigan going to lose, though? Is
a lot of roster turnover in Michigan.
Yeah, but is J.J. McCarthy coming back? Is he going to declare? We know Michael Penix is gone. Yes, Harbaugh coming back, and all these teams that are switching conferences as well. Washington and Oregon and USC going to the Big Ten. That's going to make a big difference in terms of who's taken some losses, probably earlier at different points in the season. But I like Notre Dame right around that 7 or 8 spot, though, as well. I think with what they've got we know that Notre Dame has got a championship level defense coming back, and they've got the ingredients to be a championship level offense. So going into the season, I put them right around that 7 or 8 spot. That's where I would drop Notre Dame heading into next year.
Nice. We agree.
Yes. By the way, I haven't seen Brent in here so far. He was looking for you last night.
He always comes real late. I think he's on that Monterey, California time.
Yes, and
he's my arch nemesis now.
There was more discussion about the spelling of your name when Brent jumped in last night. I think Salty dropped a reference to that earlier as well. Yeah, Salty. Eli Drinkwitz is mad about something? Very surprising. Very shocking. Very shocking. It's so weird because that guy looks like your high school science teacher. But then when he gets out there on the sideline, that guy, it's like Jekyll and Hyde. He becomes a different guy when he's coaching a game. So Jess, Vince and I talked a little bit about this last night. I'm curious to get your take. Did we see the last of Jim Harbaugh at Michigan last night?
I think this is a hard one to say. I think it's very dependent on the sanctions and how tough they are on Michigan, because I think he could very easily pull the Pete Carroll and ride off into the sunset into the NFL. But, as easy as it is to say that Jim Harbaugh could go back to the NFL, and he's had the interest before, I just don't know what that level of interest actually was. Was he just doing it kind of, flirting with the NFL to get Michigan to kind of, clamp down and tie him and extend him to a longer contract? I don't know. But the thing you got to realize in the NFL as a head coach compared to college, in college, you're basically head coach GM. In the NFL, you're just head coach. You don't have as much control, but you don't have to recruit as much, right? So there's trade-offs throughout the entire throughout the entire process.
Yeah.
I think Jim Harbaugh would want a role where he has a little bit more say than just being a head coach. And I don't know which NFL teams would offer that to him.
I mean, it is a good point. And for a guy coming out of college, how much control they would give him is curious. And like Bill Belichick, is he going to keep all of his GM duties out there in New England? We still haven't, apparently he and Robert Kraft met yesterday. We haven't heard anything about what's going to go on there. We're going to talk about Mike Vrabel in a little bit, but what led to Mike Vrabel being fired was the owner decided, hey, we just hired a new GM last year and we're going to stick with the GM. So that relationship is a big thing. And that's the fact that Jim Harbaugh lasted for a decade at Michigan. One, I think it's a little bit easier because it was alma mater.
It's already been a decade.
Yeah, but the stops that he had been before, the things that you had heard was he wears out his welcome after a fairly short amount of time. That didn't happen at Michigan, but he also has the chance now. Like there are no regrets for Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. He just led him to a national championship. So he wouldn't have to deal with, any guilt or anything like, hey, I'm leaving these guys without getting to
job's done
where we said that we were going to get. Yeah, the job's done. He's won a national championship. He wants to win a Super Bowl is kind of what we've heard. And there's been these dabblings, and there are 6 openings now in the NFL, and at least 2 of them have really strong interest in Jim Harbaugh. And I would think that if the Bears wanted to cut ties with Eberflus, that there would be a lot of interest there as well, but you do bring up a good point in terms of what kind of control he would get. I would think that he would have to sort of come to he would have to reckon with the fact that coming out of college, as successful as he is, that maybe they give him input, but that he's not going to have that kind of control. Even as a Super Bowl coach, his last time around in the NFL, that he's not going to have that kind of control right away. You're going to have to be a coach first, and then maybe some of that kind of gets added later on, depending on how things go.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, you can,
but go ahead.
You can comment all you want about Jim Harbaugh and Michigan and the wackiness and the, the ongoing investigations that are going on. But to me, as much as it pains me to say it, Jim Harbaugh is a hell of a coach. Everywhere he's been, he's had success. Did he start at San Diego or San Diego State? He went from there.
San Diego. It was lower. Yeah, it was not an FBS school.
Yeah.
That he started.
So he started at San Diego. I think finished at 11-1 there. Went on to Stanford. Had good success there. Goes on to the NFL. Has 3 NFC championships, a Super Bowl appearance against his brother, and then he goes back to college and wins a national championship. So again, you could say what you want about Jim Harbaugh, but he produces wins, and he's a hell of a coach. And so he's going to find his spot. If he wants the spot in the NFL, there's going to be someone that's going to take that bait. It's just a matter of what's that power dynamic going to look like in the NFL, because it's not going to be like it was in college. He's not calling the shots 24/7. And he can't go out there and say as much wacky stuff as he probably does in the NFL.
Yeah, and I mean, personally, like the success that he has had the last 3 years at Michigan and winning the national championship, personally, it feels like this gives him an even bigger opportunity now, to go back to the NFL, because he's not like most college going to the NFL coaches. He's already had success in the NFL, and in these places that you're talking about, like the Chargers, the Raiders, those are 2 organizations where the things that have been talked about, like there would be, like they need it factor in hiring their next head coach. Even though I think, as much as it pains me to say, Antonio Pierce is a former New York Giants linebacker, and the fact that he won Super Bowls with the Giants, like he feels like a great fit for the Raiders, but you've still got Mr. Davis in charge out there, and probably feeling like he's got to make a big splash, like he thought that he was making with Josh McDaniel. But the Chargers, I think, feel like they need to make a splash. So Jim Harbaugh would answer that in either case.
I think the best marriage or the best landing spot is the Chargers. Him, with what's on that roster, specifically Herbert, and then you bolster up some of that defense here and there. I want to that kind of scares me, honestly, because I like, not that I have anything against the Chargers, but I think they would be kind of reborn again in a couple years, maybe even a year. Again, him working with Herbert.
Yeah, Mike, I'm gonna save your comment for the Mike Vrabel conversation. Mike Huff. I'm going to save your comment for the Mike Vrabel conversation that we're going to have here in a little bit, because, of course, Vrabel was let go today. So what do you think? And Anthony had this question up earlier. Anthony says he believes there will be an asterisk by this result of the national championship game. The years if the NCAA does the right thing, even though the right thing was to disqualify them this year. But he says he hates the cheating aspect, but he does give them props for beating Ohio State, Alabama, and Washington. I hate it, but it is the fair thing to do, is what Anthony says. That is a very fair comment, Anthony. What do you think, though, becomes of the sign stealing scandal there with Michigan, Jess?
I was I wanted to wait until, because I knew this would come up today. I didn't want to say anything on Twitter last night. I didn't, I think that Michigan deserves its evening, and we'll get into the scandal part as, we come down from the national championship and the college football season officially wraps up. But I think the first thing that comes to mind is Anthony brought up a really strong point. You beat Penn State, Ohio State, Alabama, and Washington. No sign stealing. So what was the whole point?
And you beat some of them with an interim head coach running the show.
Right. And so what was the point, right? Like, you didn't need, it's clear you didn't need to get into this extravagant scheme, right? And so that's kind of my first take on this. Second take is, I don't think it ultimately matters what the NCAA decides. I think Michigan fans, Michigan players, Michigan coaches will always recognize this as a national championship season. I think in their eyes, there is nothing that is going to be done that can take that away from them. So I think that's a big point to get in as well. And then third, what I think actually comes of it, it's just so hard to say. Are we talking about, reduction in scholarships? Are we talking about vacating wins in the national championship? Are we there's just so many options on the table for the NCAA. And I just believe they're not going to hit them with the hardest one, and that's vacating the national championship. I think something's going to happen, but I don't think the national championship is ultimately going to get vacated at the end of the day.
I don't think so. I don't think it will either. I've said before that I think that you levy a big fine against the head coach and or the school. Make someone pay a stiff fine, and like that money shouldn't obviously just go into the NCAA's pockets. There should be a series of charities someplace that money goes to. But this is like, Michigan has tried to play this out like everyone steals signs. JJ McCarthy was talking about it. Well, Ohio State was stealing our signs, so we just had to find a way to catch up to what Ohio State was doing to us.
There's means and methods.
Thing, right? It's like apple, orange. Like they keep trying to compare two things that aren't the same, because I think just about everybody agree. I do hear some people defending them like, well, it's not that big a deal. Like some neutral type people. It's not that big a deal because everybody steals signs. There's still a difference in the way you go about it. It's one thing to steal signs from the other sideline or even from the press box during the game, as you're playing the game, trying to steal the signs. But it's a completely different thing to do it in advance and doing it with the detailed, complex system that Michigan had out there, with Connor Stallions obviously running this thing, and the money that they were paying to send people to games and travel, and, everything else that was involved, and, recording them and the whole thing. It's completely different to do it that way than do it just like with the Houston Astros. It's completely different, to steal it from the dugout and then, do it that way than to use electronics and everything else like the Astros were doing. So Michigan can't just, claim, oh, everybody does it. They will claim everybody does it, but that excuse just doesn't hold water. And it feels like, based on the fact that Michigan was ready to double down and take this thing to court, and they were going to fight it and everything else. And then all of a sudden, the NCAA showed them what they had on them, and they went, oh, okay, well, we'll just take the Jim Harbaugh suspension and we'll move on from there. So I don't know. I don't think that they ultimately vacate the wins, and I don't think that there's going to be an asterisk next to this. I think probably the biggest thing that'll happen at some point, Jim Harbaugh is going to be long gone, and they'll dock him some scholarships.
And that's the part to me that's a big part to me. Everyone's going to be gone by the time it all happens. The majority of this roster is turned over. Harbaugh will be gone. I think the remaining person will be
just like Michigan's Final Fours. Look how long it took them to vacate Michigan's Final Fours from back in the, like, who cares at that point? Okay, so the banner's not there. Everybody knows what those teams did.
And that's what I was getting at, is by the point something actually happens in a potential vacation of wins in the national championship, people are already going to accept it. They're not going to, it's just going to be like, yeah, that was 10 years ago. We won it. You can't take it away from us now type mentality.
Yes. Which are you going to miss more next year, the Pac-12 or the 4-team playoff format?
I'm going to miss the Pac-12. I love the expansion of the playoff. I think it makes for, determining who the better Final Four teams is. I've seen a lot of tweets flying around. Congrats to Michigan, the college football invitational winner, right? And so, that's no longer a thing. I think you're going to get more teams in, more deserving teams, and you're going to let the parity kind of play out to see who is ultimately the best remaining team. And I've said it before. I hate the idea that the Pac-12 is, basically disintegrating as is. I don't like it. I think it's stupid that they're folding in, to these bigger conferences. I would have loved to see the Pac-12 hang around, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but it's about the money, which we've discussed before. And so, yeah, I'm going to miss the playoff.
What's crazy
the Pac-12.
The Pac-12, the Pac-12, after all this stuff happens and everyone knows the fate of the Pac-12, it had one of the best seasons that it's had forever. And it gets a team playing in the national championship game. It had been since the first couple of years of the playoff with Oregon and Washington getting in until this year that both of those teams are fighting to get into the playoff. And it wasn't even those teams that everybody was talking about coming into the season. It was USC and, Caleb Williams and Heisman Trophy and all that stuff. And I really don't want to see this overexpanded Big Ten, but what we want to see, like Michael Parks just said, life ain't fair. What we want to see and what reality is are two different things. So I'm going to miss the Pac-12 because things are going to change. And I don't know that it's necessarily going to change for the better. You're going to have some really good teams. Like what happens if we end up with 5 Big Ten teams in the playoff next year or the year after that? Like it's going to tick some people off too, right? Or 5 SEC teams or whatever it happens to be, with Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC. So yeah. I'm excited about the 12-team format. I know, like, John says he's going to miss the 4-team playoff field more, but I'm excited about the 12-team format because, like, what was everybody complaining about a couple of weeks ago with that Orange Bowl disgrace? All these players opting out. Well, you're not going to have all those players from a good team opting out, that quality kind of team opting out, because they're going to have a chance to play in a playoff game instead of just a meaningless Orange Bowl.
Right. And I think the biggest thing that you said there was, unfortunately, you're always going to make someone mad, and there's always going to be someone complaining about something, right? Like, no matter if it was an 8-team, 12-team, 4-team, everyone's always, and that's unfortunately the world we live in. There's always going to be people finding a way to critique and criticize whatever is going on. But I think this is the best solution in terms of college football, an expanded playoff. You're going to see the best teams duke it out, and no one's going to be left out anymore, right? We're going to allow the game to decide itself, and I think that's how it should be.
Yeah. Anthony says 12-team format is great for Notre Dame, and I love the Irish. And, like, it could be 20 degrees next year in the middle of December, and Notre Dame might be hosting a playoff game. That would be pretty cool as far as I'm concerned. So that's what I'm It's another thing that I'm looking for. By the way, the CFP Board of Managers, there was thought that they were going to adopt the new format next for next year yesterday because of the Pac-12's dissolution, moving from the 5 automatic qualifiers and 7 at-large teams. 5+7 is how it's referred to. They were expected to vote to move it to a 6+6 because of the fact that there's only going to be 2 teams left in the Pac-12. So what that would mean is 6 automatic qualifiers and 6 at-large teams. But they have not voted on that yet because apparently there's like some things going on with these Pac-12 teams, and maybe they're going to revisit it in a couple of weeks. So that's something to kind of keep an eye on, what exactly happens with that. Anthony wants to know if you think Notre Dame would move a playoff game to Indianapolis if the weather is bad.
I think it depends on the team. I think if you're playing a team from California, there's no way, no shot that you're moving that game. That is advantageous to you. You have the home crowd, you have the home conditions, whatever it might be. But if we're talking about another Midwest team like Penn State or something, you know what I mean? A team that plays in it just as much as Notre Dame, I think it's more of a possibility. But ultimately, I'm leaning no. I would say like 90% no. But I think that there's a 10% small sliver chance that it would be the only way you would move it is if it was, again, a relative team. But you're not taking away your home field in the playoffs. It's the most important game of the season.
Yeah, especially next year, maybe 10 years down the line if there's some unique circumstances or whatever. But I think Notre Dame's going to do everything they can to have playoff games on their home field, if at all possible. So a lot of talk, speaking of which, about where the national championship game was played. Do you have any problem with them playing it in Houston last night instead of, a more traditional, like bowl site, Orange Bowl, Sugar Bowl, one of those kind of places?
No, I don't. It's just a stadium where the game is played, in my opinion. As long as
agree.
it's played in a relatively big city and it's indoors, I think you've checked all the boxes. I don't think it matters what bowl it is, what stadium it is. Again, as long as it's a nice stadium that can accommodate, a large capacity, I don't care one bit where the game is at.
I mean, Texas is a football state. They played it in SoFi Stadium. I wouldn't call California, a football state by any means. I don't think the venue matters. I think they want to have it in as nice and as big a facility as possible to get as many butts in the seat as possible. Now there are bigger places than where they played it last night, such as the Rose Bowl, and that's something that's been talked about quite a bit. There's been like this whole, should they play the championship game at the Rose Bowl every year? Do you buy or sell that? Would you want to see it at the Rose Bowl every year?
No, I do not want it to be at the Rose Bowl every year, because then I think it takes away from teams that get the opportunity to play in the Rose Bowl and not just the team that makes the national championship. I think the only way you could do it is if you did one of the early round games at the Rose Bowl, and then once you get down to the championship, you play again at the Rose Bowl. But I think it kind of, if you're only allowing the champions to play at the Rose Bowl, in the entirety of the playoff, I think it makes it a little bit, exclusive, and it takes away from, some of those other teams that might get that experience of just making it to that bowl game and getting that opportunity to play in a stadium like the Rose Bowl.
What I like is when Kirk Herbstreit started talking about this, and then fans were like, well, yeah, you get to sit up in the press box and we have to go, sit in bleacher seats, similar to Notre Dame, obviously, like the facilities are crappy. The place was built in 1920. It's an old, nasty facility, that whole thing. Everyone obviously loves the sunset out there at the Rose Bowl, but so keeping, whatever the facility is, I think it should be part of the rotation, but it should be a rotation, right? Just like the Super Bowl is in a different site every year. You need to move championship games around to expose different parts of the country to college football's biggest game, right. like Indianapolis will probably host a national championship game at some point because they have a dome stadium. If Chicago ever gets their dome stadium built out there in Arlington Heights. They'll probably get to host it at some point. They're like, you need to move it around. I don't think it should be in one place every year, regardless of what that location happens to be. I think it needs to move around. So I've been teasing the Mike Vrabel thing. He was fired after 6 seasons as the Tennessee Titans head coach today. Scale of 1 to 10. How desirable is Mike Vrabel?
I saw this earlier today from a guy that is a Cowboys. I don't know if he is still now. He started off as kind of a Cowboys reporter, moved on to more of a bigger picture at Fox. And basically his tweet was
the David Hellman. Is that
David Hellman? Yeah. He basically said there's like 4 or 5 coaches that he would absolutely take, no questions asked. And Vrabel was on his list along with like Tomlin, Sean McVay. Who are the other ones? I think Kyle Shanahan was up there. And there might have been another one. I don't see that appeal, like Vrabel. Yeah. Are they good teams? Sure. Are they sound? Sure. Do they commit a lot of mental mistakes? No. Do they commit a lot of penalties? No. But on the flip side of that, they don't do anything that really wows you, right? Like that's the part to me is like,
but look at how the teams are built, like,
yeah.
Does that have something to do with it? Like, to me, the fact that he won 3 division titles with Ryan Tannehill as his quarterback and essentially
volumes.
Essentially Derrick Henry, pounding guys and running between the tackles and, just other than that, playing really solid fundamental defense. And I think, didn't they get to the AFC Championship game that first year, for first or second year,
Yeah, because they upset the Ravens, I believe.
Yeah.
But I think the other flip side of this,
go ahead.
The flip side of this is look at the division that they were in. The Texans, Jaguars, and Colts, they're not horrible, but the AFC South wasn't strong, after Peyton Manning left.
Ryan Tannehill, Jesse.
No, I get what you're saying. I don't put him in that upper echelon of coaches that I would dump everything for, I guess is what I was getting at.
I wouldn't dump everything, but this is, of the Belichick disciples, this is the most successful of any of the Belichick disciples. Mike Vrabel.
No, and I agree with that. And to go back to the original,
I give him a 7, by the way, in terms of desirability.
I think I'm at like a 5 or a 6 maximum. I think I sit right around that 5 range. And I don't know. And him being defensive minded, I don't know about the offensive creativity. And I get what you're saying. He was handcuffed with Tannehill and, Henry was his bruiser, but I would like to see more out of out of offensive production and potential offensive creativity before I'm ready to commit, because everything else is fine with me, but we are in an offensive driven NFL. You got to score points.
See, and this is probably where, because Mike Huff had this comment earlier when we were talking about Harbaugh and, would he want control if he goes to the NFL? And Mike says the control stuff is overrated. Head coaches have control. GMs go get what coaches want. Well, apparently not so much in Tennessee, because they hired Ran Carthon as their general manager last year. And that's where things have run amok and why Vrabel is out, because apparently the GM wants to do one thing, Mike Vrabel wants to do another thing. And so the owner, rather than say, well, this coach has won 3 division championships. Granted, it's been 3 years now since he's been to the playoffs, but the owner didn't back the coach. The owner backed the general manager. They just hired a year ago because there was a disagreement in philosophy and what they wanted to do. So I don't think that the control stuff is overrated by any means. Bill Parcells used to talk about, he wants to shop for the groceries, and, like a guy like Parcells, a guy like Belichick. I don't know as much with Vrabel that I would necessarily be giving him that kind of control, because longevity track record isn't necessarily there, but Parcells and Belichick are definitely a couple guys you're going to give control to. And the more a coach shows himself over the long haul, like if his input is accepted and, player personnel, general manager type guys listen to that input, and then that input ends up working out, I think over time you build some of that up. But I definitely think that,
I get
there are
what you're
times
saying,
that
Mike,
the head can
about,
butt.
most GMs and coaches work together. Those are the successful teams. When the healthiest relationship is
Right.
between the GM and the coach, there is no doubt that those are the most successful teams, but that's not every situation. I mean, and again, I hate that it comes back to this, but Jerry Jones literally fired a guy who won 2 Super Bowls because they couldn't get along together. Like, that's
Was going to
all
be
you
the
need
next
to
words
know.
out of my mouth. Jerry wanted more credit than he was being given. Jimmy Johnson was the guy who was making all those decisions, who turned all those Herschel Walker draft picks into actual bodies who could go out and produce and win you championships. In general, I think that they work together. Sometimes that's because the coach is forced to work together with the GM,
Right.
like if a guy is given the opportunity, especially at a fairly young age, to be a head coach, then he's not, there's not much of a choice. He has to work with the GM. You hope that they're going to work together on a lot of things, but
And
it doesn't always happen.
If I'm an NFL owner, I think that you should almost have simultaneous GM and head coach interviews, because those guys have to get along, right? Like, that is a proven fact. I just said that those guys, if you want the best shot at success, those guys got to be on the same page. So it's like, you almost need to, interview them as a joint package to really see if the dynamic is going to work.
DK said Cowboys reference number 9. Sorry, DK, but we couldn't use a Lions reference there because they've had 2 good years in infinity of football in Detroit. So,
yeah, congrats on that first banner.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with what Mike is saying here for sure. The Bears, like, if they want to upgrade Harbaugh, Vrabel, like, compared to Eberflus, Vince and I talked yesterday, and I asked the question: should you keep? If you're going to keep Fields, can you also keep Eberflus?
No,
I don't think so either. At the very least, you've got to get rid of the offensive coordinator. But I think especially if you're the Bears and Harbaugh wants to be the Chicago Bears head coach, that's a no-brainer to me. Like, and even the New England Patriots, with what they're, with the whole Belichick decision out there, apparently, like, Vrabel is like, Robert Kraft is pretty high on Vrabel, which he should be, because look at the success that Vrabel has had. I think that
he's a Patriots guy.
Yeah, I mean, that potentially complicates some things, right? Like,
yeah,
if you're really weighing whether or not you're going to keep Belichick and the whole thing, like, to me, it wouldn't be much of a decision, though. Like, if I'm Robert Kraft, I would go after Vrabel with him sitting. I know Belichick has another year and all that stuff, but Belichick has shown with the personnel decisions that he has made the last, few years.
And then, segue, did you hear, not maybe hear, but read, whatever it might be, that there were talks about the Titans, like, trading Vrabel as a head coach to another team because he still has that contract, but basically they just said no because they didn't want to get into the technicalities of everything.
Yeah, because now that he's fired, obviously you don't have to worry about that. Yeah.
Right. I just think that's kind of crazy. You're just like, well, we don't want to do the paperwork, so or do something that might be more advantageous to the organization. So we're just going to fire you.
Why get a draft pick? Yeah.
Right. Why get something out of it,
But again, shows who's running the show. Like, the owners think because they've got all the money, they've also got all the knowledge. But how's that worked out in Carolina? How's that worked out in Chicago? How's that worked out in a lot of places? How's that worked out in Dallas? Because they might have had successful seasons, but they obviously haven't had championships. And that's, at the end of the day, what it's all about. All right, well, that's going to do it for tonight. Great stuff. Appreciate everybody for chiming in. Boo, Michael Parks. Boo, you and your Steelers. Take that someplace else. And yeah, Mike, I did see this stuff about Tomlin maybe stepping away after the playoffs. Like, that would be crazy as well. All right, hit the like button on your way out. Subscribe, rate, and review. And we will be back tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.